All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Entrepreneurship in Web3 panel. Yeah, we'll start in like a minute, but before we do that, I'll just give a quick introduction about our panelists and our moderator. So first we have Anand, who's joining online. And then, yeah, so he's a venture partner at Lightspeed and I think founder at Conical Crypto. And then we have Jaimin, who's the founder of Caddy, which is like a wallet extension. Altan, who's a partner engineer at Near and ex-entrepreneur in residence at Antler VC. And then we have Rong Kai, who's my mentor. He's the CEO at Parsec, a very big Web3 data company. And then finally, we have our moderator, Sean. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen him around before. He's our ex-president. And he also is an investor at Back to VC. So yeah, before we start, just a quick round of applause for our panelists and moderators.
Hi guys, so thank you so much for coming to the panel today. We are going to start by asking the panelists about their journey to date. So Anand, do you want to start with that?
Sure, happy to. Can you folks hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, I can see you as well now. All right, journey to date. I'll keep it brief because it's been about I'm like entering year 23 of the workforce, so it's a long journey. I was in college. I graduated college in 2001, so it's been a long time. But I started my career as an engineer, did a bunch of product work, led developer platforms at Microsoft. That was like the first chapter of my career, working at big companies. Always lived and worked in the Valley, and so was just surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurship, people who it really felt like they were living in the future and wanted to change what the world would look like. And I sort of naturally gravitated towards that. And so the next chapter of my career was sort of entrepreneurship focused. Started two companies. The first one was in blockchain failure. So we had a lot more success with the second one, had a good exit. And then more sort of pertinent to this panel is that in 2013, I'd started mining Bitcoin with some friends of mine. And it was a very passive endeavor, but it became exciting as time went on, as Ethereum came about, because there was programmability associated with the blockchain. But yeah, fast forward to about 2018, the company acquired. I decided that I wanted to support early stage founders, just like through the journey. And I decided I wanted to work on starting a venture studio, actually, one where I could incubate a bunch of different ideas. But because it's great advice, I decided to is one instead. So as Imran mentioned, I have kind of a hybrid role on a very early stage fund called Anand, mostly focused on Web3 infrastructure. And I'm also a venture partner at Lightspeed, which is a much larger fund of management. And I could exclusively focus on crypto infrastructure. So sorry for the long-winded background.
No, that was super cool. And you're one of the OGs in the space by getting into it in 2015, right? So a long journey, but a lot more to come, I believe. Jaimin, do you want to go next?
Sure. You guys can hear me all right? My name is Jaimin. I actually graduated from Imperial in 2018. I studied aerospace over here, so literally the building next to it. And I didn't really do that much interesting stuff while I was at Imperial, and that's kind of my bad. I did try and create a blockchain society in 2017, and it didn't get set up, probably because I spent a bit too much at the union. And then, yeah, thanks to Sean and Imran kind of carrying it forward, I really found my kind of spirit for entrepreneurship when I went to the US. So I was in third year, and I kind of figured out, what are my options here? Could do engineering, work in the Midlands, or do some finance consulting stuff. And neither seemed like good options for me. I really liked building stuff. I liked fast iterations, and I really enjoyed seeing what the CS students were doing over here. So I thought that seems really cool. Let's go to the US and do it kind of in a bigger way. And then I was basically drinking from a fire hose, got involved in like 8 different startups over 2 years, and published a couple papers, and then ended up, as you do in finance, I got a job as a quant at a bank, and I was waiting for my visa to go through. And that's when I came back into crypto. So I kind of paid attention to the space. I was really excited about smart contracts. It just seemed in 2017 that things were way too far away. I was expecting there to be about 10 years before we saw dApps or kind of what we saw with Uniswap or Aave, if you're familiar with the smart contract platforms. But when I came back, it was in 2020. I thought, you know what? There's smart contracts I can use now. We have MetaMask, we have browser extensions. This stuff is picking up way quicker than I thought. So I started by trading it, just testing things out. I set up some bots to trade for me and actually kind of built up some personal runway. So I never ended up taking the quant job. They moved me back to London, gave me a PhD position over here. I decided that I wanted to either trade full time, just as a retail trader, or build something better. And that's where I started with building Caddy, which at the time was a Telegram trading bot, which allowed you to track trades. And now it's a Chrome extension, which is a wallet companion. It plugs in next to your MetaMask. You can track your trades. It can also execute trades at cheaper prices and keep you protected from scams. Hand over to the next panelist.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Altan. I graduated from Imperial in 2021. I studied computing here, master's in computer science, basically doing a lot of work in robotics and visual computing. Before that, I really loved that sort of like creating a sort of like a parallel universe in the internet, and building that, I really got fascinated when I got into crypto last year. I really got fascinated by this like parallel universe that you can create with tokens and everything. So, and that happened while I was at a VC, like a venture fund called Antler, which is one of the biggest sort of early stage venture funds. While I was doing that, I really got into it to a point where one of the founders of the fund said, you can just go try to build a company then. So started that EAR back in August 2022 or something like that, and started just going to hackathons, really. Like went to a couple of ETH hackathons, one of which actually the project got funded, and currently building a KYC solution for Europe, funded by Outlier actually, from Caddy. And then went to NearCon in around like end of September. That was another sort of hackathon, and I won that hackathon. So it came to a choice where, do I want to build a company with some folks that I met at hackathon, or do I go work for a layer 1 blockchain? And at that time, given I'm young, I decided to go for the job, right? So I know a bit of the entrepreneurship route and coming from VC, but I took the safe route, which is quite interesting. But I can defend that at my age, which is just to learn a bit more about the technology itself and learn a bit more about Web3.
Right, thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Kai. I graduated in 2012, so I guess it's quite a while ago. From chemical engineering, I didn't do chemical engineering. Actually, I went back to Singapore. I'm a Singaporean, and I served in the Singapore police force for 8 years. So I wasn't a Web3 native, so to speak. I was actually in police force for 8 years. I left as superintendent of police. I was head operations of 1,000 guys. My expertise was in operationalizing things. I know how to move things from 10 people to 20 to 100 to 1,000, that sort of stuff. I know how to run operations that manage tens of thousands of people, 500,000 people, that sort of stuff. That was my expertise. But it was actually when I left without a job back in 2020. I left because of family reasons, and then COVID hit, and I had nothing to do. And a friend of mine who happened to be in Binance, his father had a heart attack. And I actually texted him back then and said, like, you know what, you don't have to pay me anything, let me help you. I have nothing to do anyway at home. And I did. I helped him. He took no pay leave from Binance to help his father's business out a little bit. I helped him for nothing because I just, well, why not? Your friend's in trouble. I just want to help. And after a month, he told me, I have nothing to teach you. Let me bring you into Binance instead. That's how I got into Web3. And I never looked back since. It was really exciting in this space, a lot of things to learn. A lot of things that I did was really from that perspective. I just wanted to learn. When I left Binance, it was also sort of on that kind of reasons as well. A family friend of mine, his business was failing because of COVID. I couldn't do 2 jobs at once. Binance told me to choose, and I actually chose to leave Binance because to me, I think friends are a bit more important in that sense. And I actually helped his business out. Nothing to do with Web3. It was a video company for about 3 to 6 months or so as a chief strategy. And we left on good terms, and I joined my company as COO. And I was hired as COO because I know about Web3. When I was in Binance, I actually invested in this company, my current company. And I know operations. I know how to upscale. And I think that's something that in the startup space, not many people know how to. They know how to go from 0 to 1. They know how to grow to a certain size, maybe below 20, but they don't know how to go beyond that. And that's where my expertise come in. That's my story.
Oh, super cool. I'm sure all of the 4 panelists have amazing stories to share about how they feel about the startups. And especially that I think in this room, a lot of the people are at probably the age of, need to think about what do I want to do after graduation, whether that's to head to a big company or, join a startup or maybe join a financial institution like the VCs. And obviously, you 4 have made very different choices. So we'd love to just kind of learn more about why did you make those choices when you first graduated, and would you recommend people to follow your path? And we can start with you, Anand.
Sure. So my information is a little bit dated, as you know, it's over 20 years old. Well, when I graduated, I think the amount of information that was accessible to us was very limited. It wasn't quite the same as what we have today, right? Like, I think in 2001, I think the most exciting search engine around was called Yahoo. The content was sort of indexed and accessible was also somewhat limited. So you rely on a lot of. So let me fast forward and share a little bit about the learning that I think will be applicable, which is a guide a lot of people today, including you folks. And by the way, can you hear me okay? Is it coming across okay?
Yeah, it's okay. We could hear you.
Okay. And maybe after this, I'll go get my headphones to make sure there's no echo. But what I wanted to say was, at the end of the day, you should just take time to just think of a framework that really outlines all the things that are important to you, and just sort of write those things down, whatever that is, right? So what are you trying to accomplish? What is, what is really important to you? And I do this exercise a lot, not just with graduates or, soon to be graduates, but also I do this for a lot of our portfolio companies when they're looking to hire people. I actually am a part of the interview loop sometimes, and sometimes they're looking to hire a senior engineer. And the question asked is what are you optimizing for? Is it money? Is it equity? Is it lifestyle? Is it work-life balance? And you kind of have to enumerate these things and weigh the pros and cons of one against the other, and just literally take your time to sit down and do this. So I was this thoughtful when I graduated. For me, I had a very singular mission when I graduated, which is I wanted to move to the Valley. I was going to college I went to Purdue in Indiana, which is a great engineering school, but definitely the heartland of anything entrepreneurship or technology, right? So everything that I happening. So that was my goal to get here, and I accomplished that, and haven't looked back since. So yeah, I would say that the most important thing is the learning has been to sort of establish a rubric or something that you think is that you can sort of refer back to, and it can change over time. But for now, just enumerate what are the things that are really important to you. Just pick 5 things, and then just weigh them against one against the other. Whether it's a big company, early stage company, something, joining, whatever the case might be, and you kind of you optimize this, and you'll be able to optimize for that based on sort of the analysis that you do when you compare one against the other.
Yeah, I think those are really, really important values to set out with. After you graduate, you got to kind of figure out, okay, your whole life is ahead of you. Where do you start? Where do you want to end, right, as well? And for me, I didn't really have that much of a plan. And I think a lot of people, some people are blessed because they know exactly what they want to do from a young age. And the reason that I chose engineering was I realized that you're not really sandboxed to have to do engineering. It's a really technical skill, and you get really transferable skills. It's something that's valuable. You can get employed pretty much anywhere. But I wanted my options to be open, and then I wanted to just learn as much as possible. So that's part of the reason for going to the US, to get diverse sets of experiences, to go and experience something out of my comfort zone. Kind of grew up in London my whole life, went to Imperial, kind of not too far away, and it was a great experience for me. And during that time, I was kind of wondering, do I go down the research route, thinking about PhDs or even beyond that? That's why I got involved in research, and then thought about startups as well. So just getting as many diverse experiences as possible is really beneficial to figuring it out. Because you can very much end up in your comfort zone where a lot of your friends are going down a path. Not many of my friends from Imperial, like none of them started startups. None of them, they're all kind of working in traditional jobs, which I guess a lot of your friends will end up as well. And it's very easy to just see that path as being the path of least resistance. And I kind of figured out for myself that wasn't exactly what I wanted. And I kind of bought myself time in doing another degree in doing that. But, I guess the key thing to starting a startup is you should just be building stuff. So regardless if you're in university, you just graduated or anything else, just be building stuff that you're actually passionate about. I kind of figured out for myself that I only do a really, really, really good job if I love the project I'm on. So you can find a startup which is well aligned with the things that you're passionate about, and that will set you up, and you'll be, learning a lot. You'll be working with a great team. And, it can provide a load of value. Maybe it's in a financial institution for you or consulting because, you can work really hard, learn from people with years of experience. But I would say for me, kind of a passion project was this crypto project, which then turned into something much, much more. And, I'm really happy with that. And I couldn't have forecasted if I did start from the end, like Anand kind of explained. I don't think I would have realized all the steps that I had to take to get kind of where I am and even further than that. So I would say, do take some time to really think about it because it's very easy to just fall into a common trap of, okay, what's the next thing? What are other people doing? And think for yourself.
I agree on that. By the way, like when I graduated, I also faced the same situation where I could either just do a startup full time or I could, work in a big institution. And, sometimes for me, like myself as an international student, sometimes you think about other issues such as say visa and so on and so forth, and you become kind of like less risk taking, let's say. But if you have the ability to take risks, I think you should be thinking about it because it's an era where you are rewarded for doing so. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll go next. So when I graduated in 2021, I was pretty much in the job market looking for a software engineering role, just like every other computing student would do. So I had a job offer from FANG, one of the, it's one of the big ones that later switched its name to Meta, which is currently that we talked about for a year. But I actually rejected that role because for me, like network meant a lot, being able to be around investors. So I got introduced to one of the founders of Antler, which I got really along. Like it was an amazing conversation. We had a conversation about how to predict success for founders using data, and that really caught me. Like it's something I really wanted to do. That how I started to in venture capital back in November 2021. Then I actually met Jaimin at a conference, and he was pretty much hustling in that mode. He was basically going with his talking about passion, right? Taking about his iPad, showing his Chrome extension to people in the conference, basically going around. And that's something that like an entrepreneur needs, is the passion that you want in the project that you're building. And after Antler, I was just pretty much exactly the same status where I started building things, right? Like small things and trying to take it to the market. Per se, it's hackathons for crypto because it's hard to take it to market. But anyway, I tried that a little bit, and I still do that in my free time. Try to sort of ideate a little bit and see what I can produce in a week, like in 2 weeks time. And that's something that I think students should do and take that as an opportunity to learn outside of class, because learnings you have in class are valuable, of course. Like you can, for my case, we learned about deep learning, which transformers were recently introduced and was in the curriculum at that time. Now, everybody talks about transformers, nothing about the convolutional neural networks that we learned. So it's always nice to take just look outside of the box and see what's happening outside that I can go and learn and can build in crypto. For example, like learning smart contracts, which was an option for us in computing through Solidity, but it was only one course, and there's way more beyond that if you go to that rabbit hole. So taking that opportunity to build projects and trying to take it to people like Jaimin did, going around and say, hey, like, would you use this thing, is something that you should be going for.
Right, thank you so much. I think I really like some of the sharings earlier as well, that especially when you graduate, you don't really know what you want to do. And actually, I'm in my 30s now, and I'm always thinking about some of the stuff that I wish the 20-odd-year-old me would have known back then. There's a lot of things that I did was sort of without purpose. Give you guys a good example. I was in Kendo Club, and we volunteered to do a Kendo match as volunteers because we just wanted to get a free T-shirt. Like that was the only reason why we did it. We spent a whole day at it. It was good volunteering. It was good work, but we were there for the T-shirt, and that was with no purpose to me. It's actually quite important to do things with purpose. You might not know what you want to do in life. That's fine, because your priorities in life change anyway. In my 20s, when I was in the police force, actually all the way in my early 30s, I was working 70 to 90 hours a week, all the way, 8 years, easy. And then what changed? My daughter was born. That's usually the case. And when your life priorities change, you will notice that your steps in life change as well. Your vision, the things you perceive all change. And that is fine. What you think is really important to you now might not be important to you 5 years down the road. But what doesn't change is a few things that I feel coming into Imperial College that I really enjoy my time here. Even though when I was a student, I bitched about engineering all the time. I hated it because it was 8 to 9 to 5 to 6 every day. And when you came out of college, it's dark in winter, and you're like, what the hell am I doing with my life, man? When my friends in UCL, they just have two days a week or 3 days a week, right? That sort of mentality is the same. But I enjoyed it on hindsight, because what Imperial College gave me was this hunger, curiosity for knowledge. You'd be very surprised at how fast it disappears in some of your peers by the time you reach 30. They just stopped growing, and they didn't want to grow. Why? Because life hits you hard. You'll be thinking about bills, you'll be thinking about maybe kids, maybe marriage, maybe house, and everything. Build house in one after another. But if you maintain that, I think you'll be fine. It doesn't matter where you go. I think going a little bit into the topic about startup, big companies. I started in a big company because I went back and served in the police force. Big company in the sense there's more than 13,000 police officers in Singapore. Big organizations, all sorts of things to learn. And I think the question that you need to ask yourself is, what do you lack right now? What do you want to learn? Joining a big company, you learn best practices. You learn about what shouldn't be done. You learn about what should be done. And they have already upskilled. You learn all the things that you need along the way before you come and maybe you want to start your own business after that. That is something you probably need. But you might have already done it. Maybe you did an internship with a big company, and then you say that I already have a good idea. I already have found my team. I have the network with investors. This is the time for me to go in straight and start my business. Go ahead and do it, because you might not have that startup experience yet. Go ahead and do it. The key thing in life is if you do things with purpose. I'm going to do this because I learned something from it. I'm going to do that because I learned something from it. I'm going to help my friend with no conditions because I just want to learn. That sort of thing. And preferably do good along the way. You'll be fine. Thank you.
Well said. Really well said. And I feel like priorities in life do change quite a lot. And it's one of the things that I struggle to kind of juggle with back in university. And I know, today sitting here, a lot of the people are still within their university days. And some could be thinking of doing a startup. What are some of the most important characteristics that you reckon that's quite essential for startup founders to persist in order for them to succeed in this world? I had a discussion with my partners today because I also work in a VC fund, and we mentioned the fact that we used to back university founders quite a lot. And sometimes it works out really well. Some genius, they're like in their second, third year of university, had a brilliant idea, came out and then just executed super well and then grew it to $1 billion business. But most of the students struggle to do so. So just curious to hear your thoughts on those and how you think younger founders should treat the startup world. Anand?
Yeah, happy to start, and obviously would love to hear from the other folks as well. There's like some basic criteria, or just some like a simple rubric that I employ when I speak to folks. The team is really important. The size of the market or the specific domain that you're entering is really important. Is this an app or is this a business, right? Like that's another sort of interesting discerning factor that I've noticed. When it comes to academia, working with students, the spectrum that I've seen is sometimes, especially in crypto, right? Like you can create something that feels like it's an academic research project, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum is commercial viability. So you kind of have to figure out like, where is this a research project or is this a commercially viable project? Yeah, I think you alluded to this well, right? Which is like, is this a business opportunity? Like, how big can this get? Because that's sort of like, it's an investment of your time. And I think, as some of the panelists said earlier, right? Like, learning is a constant. Like any one of these things, you can learn a ton from, right? I still learn a lot today, like meeting great founders. That doesn't change for me. But for me, these are some of the basic criteria that I sort of look for, right? Team, market size, mission, how big this can get, and then a few other things like this. But one other thing, and of course, app versus like business, right? Like, are you just building a product or are you building a business? Those are related, but also very different things. The last thing I'll mention, which I think is probably something I spend a lot of time looking into these days, is understanding why this founder should be tackling this business, right? Like, what is the specific unique insights that this founder has that they're bringing to the table, and why not someone else, right? So that's an important thing that I spend a lot of time on, is how can I, when I walk away from a meeting, I want to be thinking about this founding team, and I want to hear about something they've said that I think has kind of stuck with me. And that's because they've taught me something new, and that comes from having spent time in a specific domain. So I'll pause there. Would love to hear what the other panelists have to say.
Yeah. I think understanding the market is so important when you're building a startup. And to be honest, like you could have years of experience at a job, which helps you understand, a deep technical understanding of a market and maybe a problem that's not being solved for. What I see actually a really common mistake from founders, myself included, is that you build for something which is a problem now, which, you're not assessing whether that problem will still be there, whether there's other companies working on it, and, that's going to be sorted out in the future. But I would say that, the key thing to starting a startup is start. Like, bias to action is really important. You need to be very action driven, because the majority of people aren't going to start a startup. It's as simple as. So actually getting out there and being prepared to be wrong most of the time. I think, I've learned my fair share of mistakes of building something first and then putting it out there. No one wants it. Okay, that's wasted time. You got to actually kind of validate in the market. Okay, is this something that people want? Maybe you go out there, you show people with an iPad something that might work, might not, or you just put out some surveys or something. But you can start doing that now. There's nothing stopping any one of you going home tonight, just creating a form. Would you sign up for this thing if I actually, put it out there? I think in uni, you also have like this grading criteria where everything is marked on a scale. Like, hey, do you get a first, second, third? What percentage do you get? Is this answer wrong or right? The real world is very much not like that. There often is not a clear-cut right answer. Sometimes there is, and that makes it easy. But most of the time, you got to be prepared to explore the nuance of your idea and say, okay, for this demographic of people, is it right? maybe we're targeting the wrong demographic of people. Instead of looking at, we were targeting the average retail trader. Now we've pivoted to DeFi degen traders. So, there's a lot of different variables, and you got to be prepared to learn on the fly and have a bias to action. I say for me, those are probably the most important things that I've found personally in this entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I've been in this situation a lot, like to come from a zero, like without anything, to come into an idea and really validating that whether it makes sense. I think I talked with this Anand as well. He mentored me for a bit on this one. When I was trying to build a company, we went to hackathon, built this KYC solution in ETH Warsaw, and that got scouted by a venture fund. And the team got really excited to build it further. Like, we were 4 people. But then I chatted with my mentors and to understand, really, is this something I should be building as a recent grad? So it was because it's a KYC solution, I decided for myself that there's a deep expertise needed in that space, given you need somebody from finance to understand really the regulatory space that I have no clue of, and I decided to go against that, and also the team as well, right? Like, I would want to build a company with someone that I've known for a bit. Maybe like Jaimin did a choice to go himself, which is different way. But for myself, like, I really want to have a trust in the people that I'm building a company with, and sometimes that comes with like university, right? Like, you've been through 4 or 5 years of uni courses together. You've done some work together. You know that you work well. But for me, making a choice against the team and the idea and the timing, given for the KYC business, for example, there were already a lot of companies that are building that on chain, and decided not to go with that opportunity myself. So really, like, being in that space and really understanding, like, what are the things I should be looking for. And in crypto, like, market size, maybe we had this conversation with multiple investors already last year when it was a bull market as well. It was so hard to understand, like, what the market size would be. I remember, like, when I was an Antler, trying to really, like, give arguments as to why a market size would be big, and we would be shut down immediately by the other investors that are a bit more like coming from a bit of SaaS space, like software as a solution, where those are pretty easy to understand, versus for crypto that was hard. But overall, it's just like assessing if you think about a computer science problem, like, you're at a tree and you need to make choices given whatever you're given, right? So for me, that was a no, but I'm happy with my work at Near as well. So that was a good outcome for me for now.
All right, thank you so much. The rest of the panelists actually shared really a lot of stuff that probably there's just a few points I wanted to add to their points, because they more or less covered the whole thing. So, for example, Anand mentioned about teams. What exactly it is. When I was in Binance, I was actually in Binance X, the smallest, it no longer exists, but back then it was the smallest ticket investment arm of Binance. And when we we were the ones who invest in startups because we were the smallest tickets. And the first thing we look at is teams, what Anand means, and exactly what he means by team. What is the makeup of the team, the skill sets of the team, and can you form a team with the smallest number of people possible? Actually, that's very important. You don't need 10 people in the founding team. You don't need 20. Keep it as small as possible, but make sure they all have very diverse skill sets. You need someone who can operationalize the whole thing, who can scale. If not, this startup is going to die no matter how big the idea is, because they can't scale. You need someone who is like a salesperson, probably the CEO or someone like that, who can sell a vision, sell the idea, sell whatever it is. You need someone else who can do different things along it, especially networking. Someone who can talk, someone who can get the funds coming in, someone who can do these kind of things. It could be the same person. If it's the same person, cool. Make sure that it's the smallest number of people possible. And that is probably extremely important. And that's not something that not many people know or actually really look out for when you're trying to form a team. Give you guys an example. In my company, Parsec, I'm not the founding team. I was hired by them to be COO. But the founding team, there were just 3+1 in that sense. As small as possible. My CEO is the serious guy. He's the one who set up. He knows how to go from 0 to 1. He will probably struggle with 1 to 100 because that's why he hires me. The other guy is cybersecurity background. He trades, so he can turn my treasury into something big, and that was actually a good skill set. And the last guy is a party animal, and we need someone like that because he can get you the weirdest, the wackiest deals that you have you never heard of, and it works. And that's something that you need in the kind of company that you have. And I say 3+1 because the last person is actually the sort of like blockchain architect. He's actually a professor from Riga. And he actually one of the reasons why a lot of people look at our company right now. He's like the brain behind it. When you have someone like that, it instills a lot of confidence that this product is legit because there's some big brain behind it. And that's something that you do have to think about when you want to start something. It's not just your garage friends or your university mates. Make sure that they have their skill sets that you don't have. If they have the exact same skill set as you, then that's the wrong kind of teams that you have. I think the second thing I want to touch on a little bit more is time and space. It's a little bit of combination of what they share, but time and space is everything in this sort of market. Is this the right time to raise money, for example? Is your product too early? Is your product too late? How fast is it going to go out? You have to sort of estimate to the best of your abilities. Does this make sense? Is this idea great? And you have to put in, I'm a chartered project manager, and there's a lot of different kind of stuff. You learn project management as a module as well. There's a lot of different things, cascade, etc. But you do in tech, a lot of people are doing it in sprints, and there's a reason why, because you need to be prepared to pivot and change. One of the things when I first came into my company, I told my CTO this thing. I don't envy your job because CTOs for startups, very often they face a bottleneck eventually when the product is trying to scale. And if that bottleneck cannot be solved, they have to make a decision whether to start all over again. And that is extremely painful for a CTO. But that's the kind of time and space you need to look at as well. Ideally, you observe that already and you put in place scaling plans right from the start. If not, you're going to break down everything and rebuild it again. Thank you.
Well said. I think especially with the CTO part, because a lot of the Imperial students are quite technical, and I think a lot of them have the capabilities of becoming CTOs of startups. But what I've kind of observed kind of over my short time at VC so far is that a lot of the young university students who kind of became CTO at a company, maybe 1-2 years down the line as the company grows, they start to become less equipped for what's needed. And then usually a more senior person needs to come in to lead a team, and then becomes a difficult decision to replace your CTO or like replace the founding team. And becomes, a lot of the times is like you find a team that you trust, not necessarily you find the best team that could be there to solve this problem. So, talking about that, sometimes we think that entrepreneurship in Web3 could be a bit different to Web2, especially the fact that Web3 is such a narrative-driven industry, at least at this moment. What do you guys think? How do you think the narrative or like say entrepreneurship differs between Web2 and Web3? Kai, do you want to start?
Entrepreneurship in Web2 versus Web3, this is a very good question. I think the narrative or start, because Web3 right now is in this space where, at least in the past bull market, actually in the past maybe 2 to 3 bull markets, it's mostly about selling dreams. Most things, vast majority of companies on Web3 are not profitable. They can't stand on its own. They're not going to be able to survive. They probably have runway, they get investment runway, but that's it. They can last for maybe a number of years. And until then, when their runway is going to start running out, they're going to ask for the next raise and so on and so forth. I think in this Web3 space, the narrative therefore is extremely dependent on that selling of dreams for now, because the market hasn't really caught up yet. Again, I can give you guys an example. My company, when we first started, it was in the real-time space. Without going into too much technical details, in the end, we found that we were a bit too far ahead of the market. We built something really powerful. The professor came up with if this then that for Web3. So if certain things happen, you can automate a hell lot of stuff. Until we found out that the vast majority of our clients were just using it to notify their community, you know, there's this thing happening, yay. And full stop. And that's it. That's all they care about. And if that's the case, we might as well build something that's not so complicated. So in a lot of sense, there are a lot of good companies in this space with really good tech, but they're not going to make it if they don't switch or switch gear as fast as possible. They're not going to make it if the narratives don't change as well according to how it is. But I think the difficulty between Web 2 and Web 3 is also if you're an investor or a degen or anyone that's in the public, how do you tell the bullshit from the really good companies? You can tell over a long run, but in the short run, especially in the bull market, how can you tell? You need to look at when everything is booming, everyone seems to be making money, everyone seems to be in the green. What is it really telling you? I think a lot of times you need to look at the product itself, test it out if you know. It goes back a lot to the Web 2 way of I would say like retail investing. If you buy from Amazon and all your friends buy from Amazon, will you trust Amazon stock? You probably will trust it a bit more rather than something, oh, there's a big hype. Do you understand it? Maybe you don't. Does someone else understand it? And try to go from there. And if no one understands it and they build a really good narrative that, oh, they're going to reach there, then you need to ask a lot more questions. You need to ask about why, you need to ask about how, you need to ask about the whats. And I think that is how Web3 is going to transit as well. Past this bear market, a lot more people are going to ask all those kind of questions. And I think that's probably where Web 2 and Web 3 also converges in terms of how the space is going to be.
Yeah, I think so I work at Near Foundation, which is a layer 1 blockchain that raised a lot of money, just to mention like 500 million last year. And after coming out of the bull market, we hired a very sort of a CEO that comes from like corporate background. So like worked at NatWest, worked at BCG, built Circle. She was there as CMO. And the questions we started to ask is like, how do we take and build products that are for the consumer, right? So consumer could be anybody that's using the internet today. And so that's why we started to sort of like change our thesis and narrative around that, and mainly going after use cases that we've seen that worked, right? So for us in that like Web 2 to Web 3 sort of path, we started to sort of find a lot of startups that are building like loyalty solutions that we think it's a good solution, and it's a improvement to bonus points that you would probably encounter everywhere in the world today. And that's sort of the narrative that we're trying to see, and then really starting to find startups that can actually generate money, right? Like something that's coming in, plug into enterprise, plug in their APIs, and being able to use that technology. That's what we're selling basically on the layer 1 blockchain side of things, and being really easy to use, because I think as we talked before, right, like crypto has been white paper driven, very deeply technical sort of consensus algorithms and things like that that nobody really cares about except you're academic. That's something we want to see, and in that transition, really like how to become a sort of a good Web3 founder. Like if I look at the market today, maybe it's driven by the bear market too, they've created and they understand how to generate revenue, right? Something that I would back today, rather than somebody coming in and selling a dream. But again, it's very narrative driven. It's a bear market, so it's easy to say these things when it's hard to say those in the bull market when everybody's selling a dream. So that's sort of like how I see the world today. But come and ask me in 2 years, that's probably different. So
yeah, I think bull markets versus bear markets, like obviously every sector is affected by them, but I think in crypto, the highs are really, really high and the lows are really, really low. I mean, it's amplified when everything is nascent, there's new technologies, hacks going on everywhere. So there's a certain degree of risks, I guess, for investors as well, when they're putting money into crypto companies. 2 years ago, you could have said, you just write a white paper or have a pitch deck, you could probably raise, a decent sized round, and then you get building. I think the bar, in Web 2, that's not really what happens. You actually have to have, something promising, maybe like an early MVP. There are some teams which can raise through just the pitch deck, but it's much rarer, and the round sizes are a lot smaller. And that's because a lot of VCs, a lot of investors got very excited about this technology, which really does like free up money, because the UX of money is meant to be improved. I would say that now the standards are somewhat different, where similar to how I guess we've all said, revenue is key. So, going through the various rounds of funding, if you're a seed or Series A and you're kind of pre-revenue, that's very unlikely. You're very unlikely to raise another round of funding, and that's what you really need. So now we've seen this huge transition of companies which they were just selling a massive dream of this massive market that doesn't exist yet, but it will in the future. And now are pivoting to, okay, how can we actually drive business value today? What do we need to do there? Maybe the market is much smaller than they estimated. Maybe, the revenues are smaller, but, that's kind of what you need to, the standards that you need to hold yourself to as you're building in this. I did intern at a couple of Web 2 companies. I've never obviously started one myself. But what I noticed is that actually the people who are building the startups, there seems to be some kind of different passion when you're in Web3, which I don't really see outside of Web3. And that's, it's largely driven by communities of people who are, I guess, related in some way through tokens, through, hackathons. And I do see like a lot of young people as well entering the space. It's really great to see. And to be honest, I think that's one of the reasons why I love working in the space. There's just this really vibrant culture, which I don't really see. I have some friends who are doing machine learning startups. And when they go to conferences, it's all very technical, and they're like discussing the papers or the advancements in autoencoders and transformers and stuff. And when we're going to conferences, it's very different. There is a bit of a party atmosphere, to be honest. That's all good fun and games. But also, like the people who are hacking and actually building the stuff, they're super passionate. They're just happy to brainstorm for like 24 hours, 48 hours on some topics, which I think is rare. And I think it's just, people are very excited about being in the space. We'll see how long that lasts for. I think things are converging quite a bit. I think the energy, will eventually settle when this technology isn't as nascent. But that's just some observations I've had.
Yeah, I think the others have captured it really well. I think for me, I kind of work backwards from an end state where the hope is that crypto rails support a lot of existing functionality. And so this world does converge at some point, right? So when I was sitting down and I was creating sort of my own framework on what I wanted to work on, this was back in 2018, one of the things I was thinking about was, and it took a while, like I didn't jump into this. And I remember when COVID had happened in 2020, and I was my daughter's teacher, right? So I was sitting here and helping her work her way through online class. And I was kind of writing down hey, what does the future look like for her in 2030, right? So that's 10 years later. And as someone who was sort of starting to get ingrained more and more in crypto, I was doing a lot of DeFi. I was working on I was building a few smart contracts myself. And to me, I felt like the end state might be where someone like my daughter, who's now almost 10, when she is, maybe a teen, or maybe when she's in her 20s, that she's using crypto rails and doesn't even know she's using crypto, right? So these worlds start to converge a lot. And so today they feel like really different things. And we've got this moniker that's like Web3, Web2. Yes, as I think Jaimin pointed out very correctly, community is a big part of Web3 today, a lot of energy there. But at the hopefully adoption comes from everyday users using products that are driven or built on top of crypto rails, right? So that's sort of the hope, the end state that we hope to get to. So not a direct answer to your question, Sean, but I think I'm just kind of working backwards from where I'm hoping things will, settle where the pendulum is today. And it looks like it's somewhat it swings back and forth a lot, but at some point it'll settle and it feels like it's just, it's something, maybe this may be a terrible analogy, but it feels like, at some point, a lot of products that we were using back in the 2007, 2010 era made the switch from data centers to cloud, right? And there feels like there's an opportunity here to leverage what a decentralized ledger of sorts can offer. for some applications like DeFi, and that could be really powerful. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. My 2 Satoshis.
Well, thank you for those comprehensive answers. And given the time being, we'd just like to ask you guys one last question. If you have $1 million to invest into Web3 today, what vertical would you invest into? Anand, do you want to start?
Oh man, why do I have to go first on this one? Listen, it's a really good question. I think I need some time to think about this. Let me push this a little bit and just kind of stretch out the narrative, which is, I feel like this happens a lot. I'll give you a little bit of background. I'll tell you why I'm excited about this. I've talked to a lot of people over the last few months since the FTX incident, and it felt like it was getting more pervasive after Terra Luna, which is like, why are you all just building products for yourselves, right? Like, it feels like, and the way I described it to some of my investors was that today, the world of crypto feels like a casino, right? Like, you need to know that, like, hey, I need to enter this casino. I traded my fiat for some chips, and then I play some games. That could be DeFi, that could be some NFT thing. It's like there's a lot of speculation involved there. But then if you make money, you never leave the casino. You're kind of in there, bleary-eyed, you don't even know what happens in the world. And we all went through that, like from 2020 to 2021, but you kind of, again, it takes a special kind of skill and art to get into this casino, right? But by the way, this is not an uncommon perception. It's fairly common. And for those of you who are like ingrained in Web3, this feels like, well, really, like, I don't want to be someone who's building a casino. But it is sort of what the perception is today. So this is not an area that I'm particularly like close to investing in, but I feel like for us to show that there's more, that this technology that's being built that, some of us are working on, like Altan working on it here, or others, with Parsec, etc. We need to have this thread between adoption, or like mass adoption of what the blockchain has to offer. So and there's many manifestations of that, right? Like if you're, Vitalik had a great post kind of ended last year around real world utility and things of that nature. And I feel like, that's a very broad marker, but I'd love to see more work happen there. And I don't want to force this, right? Like, it's not like, hey, let's create something because nothing can do it. There has got to be efficiency. There's got to be a bigger advantage of what the incumbent processes have to offer today, because there's some inefficiencies. So it's not a direct, I'm not telling you like it's product X, but it's basically an area that I feel like if we all want to, we all believe in technology, and if we want to go from academic project to commercial viability, then we need to start seeing more real world utility. And one facet of that could be that DeFi crosses a chasm and becomes more mainstream. It is already mainstream in some ways, and it just needs to, it's found great product market fit with us. We need to sort of like elevate that status, make it more mainstream usable. And there are so many things that need to happen before we get there. So I'll stop there. It's maybe 10,000 foot answer. But it's a very, very good question. I think we should all be asking ourselves this like all the time. I imagine that's the only amount of money you have. You can only make these bets. What would you do? And you get to put all your money into it. It's a fantastic question.
I mean, that's a fantastic answer too. I mean, mass adoption for DeFi is definitely one of the things that I personally look at quite a lot. And whenever I'm making investment for the fund, I always ask myself, like, would I put my mom's retirement money into this? Would I put my pension into this? If yes, then, that could be a good investment. If not, then, maybe don't leverage it at least, right? So, Jaimin, what do you think?
Well, for a start, I don't think I have as nuanced an answer, but you don't need $1 million to invest in crypto. That's like the beauty of it, right? You can start with $5 or like £5, whatever you want. And if I was to just like pick a sector that I want to invest in, it's for me DeFi, because I have like a better understanding of that than the other areas. And I don't want to bet on specific projects because shit happens, stuff gets hacked, teams just break up. So like buying a basket of DeFi tokens, whatever is at the top 10, I'd happily invest in something like an index over there. As well as, I do think obviously Bitcoin, Ethereum have some Lindy, meaning they've been around for the longest and will probably persist. These are kind of investments, but it all depends on your risk tolerance. Like my perfect portfolio certainly doesn't look like other people's. It just depends on what you're interested in, what you can really find, your passion in as well, and really understand that space. So I don't really have a good answer, but yeah, you could just try. Some skin in the game is never that harmful as long as it's not too much skin.
I guess if you have 1 million, you probably invest in yourself, right?
Oh yeah. The Caddy Seed round, which we'll be opening at some point this year.
Great, Altan.
Yeah, so I basically I've been seeing the market a lot, given sitting in the layer 1 blockchain, because we have a lot of inflow, given a lot of teams are trying to fundraise, but mainly going back to fundamentals of crypto, because I've been starting to think about this a lot, what's the use case, right? And that's one of them is money, right? It basically takes all the power from the banks and gives it to users. Well, it doesn't really mean anything in the West, right? When you sit in the US and really trust the central bank. But it means a lot in certain countries, right? If you go to Latin America, if you go to Turkey where I grew up, 89% inflation is just horrific, right? So you don't want to keep that money in Turkish lira. So what you do is buy other assets, right? So, and given a lot of people like us who's been going with internet, crypto is a good sort of a way to think about that, right? If you think about everybody's going to touch more and more and touch that digital money more, that's my thesis around it. And we also seen this a lot in the recent sort of earthquakes happened in Turkey, is that you can imagine a system where you can send money easily across borders pretty fast, because if you used other providers, if you're sending $50 which you've saved, working really hard to back to your to help people, 6 to 8% on those transfers is a bit high. So in those cases, you can actually make a business argument as to what to invest. So I'm a bit more bullish on these cases where you can actually see real world utility. The other one, kind of funny that I'm just thinking about it now. There's another company building on Near that's doing sort of cashback on crypto. So the argument of the founder was basically saying that every time you do a cashback, you sort of paying these providers like Stripe or anybody. And the founder doesn't want to pay that, right? So it's basically sending really sort of cheap transactions back to the users as cashback. It's something that's it's probably going to touch some of the users in the next 1 to 2 years now that I see the whole landscape. So those are what I'm excited about in this space.
There's a lot of really good answers from the other panelists. If I have $1 million, I wouldn't put all of them in crypto, of course. But I think it all depends on your risk appetite. But assuming that 1 million is going to go into crypto, and ideally it should be invested into, I think, as what the question was saying, certain verticals. My key points, I think, is a few things. Think about what makes the entire ecosystem work. How do they stand on its own? A lot of money goes into DeFi investments, centralized exchanges, etc., because they make money flow in that sense. And that's where the money is. And that's where a lot of money is to be made. Huge volumes, high transactions, and I think in a lot of countries with high inflation, corrupt governments, etc., that could only be the way out for them. And that's where the money is, yes. But I think that without those, or not counting those, I'll look at the other things that people really, really need as well. What is the next big thing? Don't think about dreams or whatever. Don't think too far into it. My advice will be look at fundamentals. What do people need for the whole system to work? What are the infrastructure that you need? The infrastructure is never complete. Even at the layer 1s or layer 2s, it's a work that never ends. And they're continuously improving it. Why? That sort of questions. Ask yourself, how do certain things work? How do we move one thing from one end to the other? And if the infrastructure is set up, what are you going to use it for? Other than financial means. I'll be interested in games. That is a natural kind of progression. But DeFi or like GameFi has been kind of disappointing in the previous bull market because it was sort of like the 2018 ICO phase repeated in NFT version. Everyone's just saying that, hey, I have this dream, buy that NFT series to fund the game, and nothing much comes out of it. Or it's not very fun. I think it will converge with serious people building serious games, some form of functions, ideally, and I think mass adoption comes in as well. Ideally, maybe the end user doesn't even know that he's interfacing with like a Web3 kind of thing. He realizes, oh, maybe he can sell this item, and actually behind the scenes is Web3. Or maybe it's more obvious because maybe education catches up and the end user knows how to do it. But either way, I'll be interested in that. There's a lot of other things that sort of comes into real life applications as well. Think about it yourself. In insurance, title deeds, etc. All of those can be facilitated using NFTs. But it's not just NFTs, of course. There's a lot of things to explore. Yeah, thank you.
That's pretty fresh. We talked about fundamentals. Like, wow, haven't heard of that word for a long time in crypto. But thank you so much for sitting with us today, guys. And thank you so much for all the 4 amazing panelists. Could we just give them a round of applause, please? Cool. I believe the pizza should be arriving soon. And Anand, thank you so much for joining us from far away. And we'd love to have you again soon at some time in the future. And thank you guys as well. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no worries, buddy. Thanks, man. No, that was brilliant. Brilliant. I loved all of your inputs.